A smug smile. That was all he gave me when he said his ex would be the guest of honor at our 10-year anniversary. He thought this party was his victory, my final humiliation. But he forgot one thing. While he was busy planning my exit, I was the one planning the party. My name is Alara Vane, and for 10 years, I have been the perfect wife. I stood in the center of our living room, a vast expanse of glass and cold, gray steel that overlooked the Denver skyline. This was our Cherry Creek penthouse, a place Julian called home and I called a beautifully constructed cage. The florists were arranging white orchids, thousands of them, their petals perfect and lifeless against the polished marble. They were checking their tablets, whispering about stems and lighting. I was supervising the preparations for my 10th wedding anniversary party, and I felt nothing at all. The air was sterile, chilled to a perfect 70 degrees, carrying the faint metallic scent of the sculptures Julian insisted on buying. The elevator chimed, its soft tone a precursor to his arrival. Julian, always 39 in his own mind, a senior executive at Aurelian Capital Partners, entered the room. He didn't look at me. He never did. Not really. He walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked at his own reflection, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke shirt. He was a man obsessed with his own image, and I was merely one of his most expensive, well-maintained accessories. The caterers seem competent, at least, he said, his voice flat. He was still watching himself. They should be. They're costing a fortune, I replied, my voice just as smooth, just as practiced. He finally turned, but his eyes slid past me. Good, good. He ran a hand through his dark hair, perfectly silvered at the temples. Oh, by the way, I've invited Serafina to the party. Shh, there it was. Dropped into the conversation as casually as if he were mentioning the weather. She just moved back to Denver, he continued, finally meeting my gaze with a look of manufactured innocence. You know, for old time's sake, we're all friends here. Serafina, the ghost who had haunted every room of our marriage, his college girlfriend, the one he never forgot. The name itself felt like a shard of ice pressed against my skin. For 10 years, I had heard whispers of her, seen the way his eyes would linger on women with her shade of blonde hair, felt the sudden chill when her name came up in conversation with his college friends. I manufactured the smile I had spent a decade perfecting. It was bright, supportive, and completely hollow. Of course, Julian, that's wonderful. He walked over and patted my cheek, a gesture one might use on a child or a well-behaved pet. A flicker of genuine satisfaction crossed his face. He was pleased with my reaction, with my compliance. That's why I love you, Ilara, he said, his voice condescendingly warm. You're always so reasonable. Don't make things awkward. He thought I was reasonable. He thought I was accommodating. He thought, after 10 years of playing the supportive, oblivious wife, that I was simply manageable. He turned and walked toward his study, his mission accomplished, his casual cruelty delivered for the day. I have calls to make. Make sure the bar is stocked with the Macallan 50. I stood perfectly still until I heard the heavy door of his office click shut. The smile dissolved. He didn't know. He had no idea. He didn't know that I had been aware of Serafina's return for the last 6 months. Not just her return to Denver, but her return to his life, his bed, and his finances. I turned back to the engraved ivory-colored guest list on the marble console. I ran my finger down the list of names, all the powerful, influential people Julian was so desperate to impress. I continued past the last typed name, down to the 2 I had added myself, written by hand in my own precise, clear script. Julian didn't know that this party, this entire opulent celebration of our perfect decade, was not his idea. It was mine. I had suggested it 2 months ago, planting the seed in his mind so deftly that he believed it was his own brilliant thought. I had proposed it right after I found the truth, right after the accidental cloud sync revealed the life he was living behind my back. Julian thought this party was his stage to parade his old flame, a final, quiet humiliation for me before he moved on to his next chapter. He thought he was in control. He thought I was just the hostess, the simple wife he'd once convinced to give up a promising career in forensic accounting to manage his household. He thought I was stupid. He forgot what I used to do for a living. This wasn't his party. It was his tribunal. And the invitations had already been sent. It began 6 months ago. The penthouse was silent, suffocatingly so. Julian was in Singapore on a business trip, a 2-week affair to close what he called a 9-figure deal. I was in his home office, a room I despised. It was his sanctuary of dark mahogany, leather-bound books he never read, and the faint, lingering scent of his expensive cologne. I was doing our taxes. It was the one financial chore Julian allowed me to handle, the one task he found so tedious that he gladly passed it off to his non-financial wife. I was on his desktop, a sleek, imposing machine, searching for a K1 partnership statement he had misplaced. That's when I saw it, a small, flashing yellow icon in the corner of the screen, a cloud synchronization error. My pulse didn't quicken. I felt nothing but mild annoyance. I clicked the icon to clear the notification. A diagnostic window popped up. A single folder had failed to upload due to its size. The folder was named Legacy Project. It wasn't curiosity that made me click it. It was instinct. The old, dormant instinct of a hunter who spots a track that is just slightly out of place. The instinct I used to live by, back when I was Alara Vane, forensic accountant, and not just Mrs. Julian Vane, hostess. The folder wasn't even password protected. His arrogance was that complete. It opened, revealing a half-dozen subfolders. The first one I clicked was labeled Videos. The file names were just dates. I clicked the most recent one. The audio loaded first. A woman's laugh, high and breathless. Then the video buffered. It was Serafina. I knew her face instantly from the old college photos Julian kept in his desk. She was in a hotel room, wearing one of Julian's shirts. And then Julian walked into the frame, holding a bottle of champagne. I watched for 3 minutes. I watched as my husband kissed her, as he spoke to her in a voice he had not used with me in years. The nausea rose, hot and acidic in my throat. I closed the file. My hand was shaking. I clicked on messages. Hundreds of them. Explicit, loving, planning their future. But the real panic, the ice water in the veins terror, didn't hit until I clicked the subfolder labeled Contracts. This was worse than infidelity. This was annihilation. It was filled with scanned legal documents, bank applications, a second mortgage agreement for our penthouse. The penthouse my family's money had provided the down payment for. He was leveraging our home, our assets, for a series of incredibly risky, off-book investments. And at the bottom of the signature line, I saw my name, Alara Vane. It was a forgery, a meticulous, near-perfect forgery, but it wasn't my signature. I hadn't looped the E like that since I was 21. He had faked my signature. He had committed bank fraud. My breath hitched, but I didn't stop. I kept digging, the shock hardening into a cold, sharp-edged clarity. I found the last folder. Audio notes. I pressed play. It was Julian and Serafina, their voices soft, pillow talk. The party will be the perfect debut, Julian was saying. All my partners will be there. Marcus will be there. They'll see us together. It will make the transition clean. Serafina's voice, like honey and venom. And Alara. What about your little party hostess? Julian laughed. A low, cruel sound. She'll play her part. She has no idea. The morning after the party, I'll have her served with the divorce papers. My lawyers have it all set. We're claiming mental instability, maybe an addiction. The prenup has a fraud clause. She'll be tied up in court for years. She won't get a dime. She's too docile to fight. And frankly, she's completely, Utterly financially illiterate. Financially illiterate. Docile. I sat back in his $1,000 leather chair. The hum of the computer was the only sound in the vast, dark apartment. He was right. I had been docile. I had played the part of the perfect, supportive, brainless wife so well that I had even started to believe it myself. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. He wouldn't be back from Singapore for another 48 hours. The financially illiterate wife stood up, walked to her own study, and retrieved the high-capacity external hard drive she kept for her old case files. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw his priceless sculpture off the balcony, though I wanted to. Instead, I plugged the drive into his desktop. I initiated a full sector-by-sector clone of his entire hard drive, every file, every video, every message, and every last fraudulent document. As the small blue progress bar crept across the screen, I opened a new, encrypted file on my own laptop. He thought he was planning an exit strategy. I, Ilara Vane, the woman he forgot, began my own secret, forensic audit of his entire life. The hard drive was a start, but it wasn't enough. Julian was a senior executive at a private equity firm. He lived in a world of plausible deniability. He could claim the files were fake, that I had planted them, that his mentally unstable wife was lashing out. I knew the legal playbook because I used to help write it for the prosecution. Digital files were damning, but in a high-stakes divorce, they could be litigated into oblivion. I needed something physical. I needed something legally undeniable. I needed proof that couldn't be explained away as a misunderstanding. I also knew I couldn't do it alone. I was an accountant, not a spy. Before I married Julian, I had my own career, my own money. After he convinced me to quit, I had consolidated most of my accounts into our joint portfolios, a sign of trust, he had called it, but I hadn't consolidated everything. I had kept one investment account, a nest egg from my first major case, hidden away under my maiden name. It was my what if fund. Julian had no idea it existed. It held just over $200,000. I liquidated half of it. I wasn't just going to hire a private investigator. I was going to hire the best one in Denver. Her name was Jenna Riley. She didn't advertise. Her clients were the kind of people who didn't want their problems listed in the phone book. She specialized in high-net-worth financial fraud, the kind that happened behind the gates of Cherry Hills and the closed doors of downtown boardrooms. Our meeting was not in a fancy office. It was at a dimly lit table in the back of a 24-hour diner off Colfax, a place that smelled of stale coffee and industrial bleach. Jenna Riley arrived exactly on time. She looked less like a PI and more like a burnt-out corporate lawyer, sharp in a way that had been worn down by cynicism. She wore a black pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes missed nothing. She ordered a black coffee and didn't smile. "You have 30 minutes, she said, her voice gravelly. I didn't waste time with tears or a story of a broken heart. She wouldn't care. I slid a thin, hard-backed ledger across the vinyl table. "You think you're here for an infidelity case," I said. "You're not." Jenna raised an eyebrow, her skepticism palpable. She clearly thought I was just another scorned trophy wife, clutching my pearls. "Ma'am, I've seen it all. Your husband's cheating. It's sad, it's boring, and it's expensive to prove. What makes you different?" "Open the ledger," I said. She flipped it open. It wasn't full of diary entries. It was full of numbers. My analysis. "My husband isn't just cheating on me," I stated, keeping my voice low and steady. "He is actively embezzling from our marital assets. He has forged my signature on a second mortgage application for our primary residence, a property I have a significant premarital stake in. That is bank fraud. The numbers on page 3 are the routing and account numbers for the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands where he's diverting the funds." I pushed a single piece of paper toward her. "And that is the name of his mistress, Serafina Brennan. She is the beneficiary of 2 of those accounts." Jenna was silent. She wasn't looking at me with pity anymore. She was looking at the numbers. Her fingers traced the wire transfer notations. The change in her demeanor was absolute. The boredom was gone, replaced by the sharp, sudden focus of a predator. "He thinks you're a fool," she said. It wasn't a question. "He thinks I'm a housewife," I corrected her. "He forgot what I used to be." Jenna closed the ledger. "He didn't just forget. He was arrogant. Men like him always are. They think because you're managing florists, you're not capable of managing a balance sheet." She took a long sip of her coffee. "What do you want, Mrs. Vane?" "I want everything," I said, my voice cold. "I need physical, undeniable proof. I need photos of Julian and Serafina, but not just at a restaurant. I need hotel check-ins. I need cohabitation. I want evidence so concrete that his high-priced lawyers won't have a single crack to slip through. And I need to know why Serafina is really back in Denver. It's not just for him. There's a financial component I'm missing." Jenna's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "This is going to cost you." "I'm aware," I said. She nodded. "I'll have a team on them by sunrise. You'll have a full report in 72 hours. She started to gather her things, then paused. "One last thing. You said he works at Aurelian Capital Partners." "Yes," I said. "A senior executive?" "Interesting," she mused. "Just professional curiosity. But I heard a rumor about Aurelian. They're going through a very quiet, very aggressive internal audit. They're looking for a leak, or maybe a scapegoat. The timing of your husband's little project might not be a coincidence at all." The call from Jenna came 3 days later. It was a burner phone, one she had handed me at the diner. "The Java Hut. 1 hour." This time, we weren't at a grimy diner. We were at a sterile, corporate coffee shop, surrounded by people in suits staring at laptops. The anonymity was just as good. Jenna slid a manila envelope onto the table between our lattes. "The good news," she said, her voice a low monotone. "Your husband is sloppy. My team got him checking into the Four Seasons with Ms. Brennan last night. High-res, time-stamped, crystal clear. The infidelity part of your case is locked, loaded, and airtight." I felt a small, bitter twist in my gut, but I nodded. "And the bad news," Jenna leaned in, and the cynical amusement was gone from her eyes. "The bad news is that your husband's affair is the least interesting thing about him." She pushed a second, thinner file toward me. "Serafina Brennan. She's not just an old flame who drifted back into town. She was hired 8 months ago by Aurelian Capital. Her title is Strategic Consultant. Vague, expensive, and reports directly to the executive committee." A cold dread, entirely different from the sting of betrayal, settled over me. 8 months. He had been planning this, with her, for 8 months, while I was picking out paint colors for the guest room. "So he brought her here," I whispered. "He gave her a job." "That's what I thought, too," Jenna said. "I thought he was just the standard, narcissistic CEO type, moving his mistress onto the payroll. So, I had my team do something extra. After Julian left the hotel last night, I kept the tail on her." Jenna sipped her coffee, watching me. "Serafina left the Four Seasons around midnight. She drove her new Porsche, the one Julian is probably paying the lease on, back toward her condo in Cherry Creek. She even parked in her designated spot. And," I asked. "And then," Jenna said, "she got out, walked through the lobby, and exited through a service door into the back alley. A black Escalade was waiting for. No plates. My guy had to risk it to follow." The coffee shop around me faded, the clatter of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. It all went silent. Jenna, where did she go? She didn't go home. The Escalade took her to a $20 million estate in Cherry Hills Village. A fortress. She didn't use the guest entrance. She used a private key code for the main gate. She's still there. Whose house is it? I could barely form the words. Jenna looked me dead in the eye. "It belongs to Marcus Thorne." The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Thorne. Not just a partner, not just Julian's boss. Marcus Thorne was the founder and CEO of Aurelian Capital. He was a legend in Denver, a titan of finance, a man Julian spoke of with a mixture of reverence and terror. I was falling. The entire world I thought I understood had just dissolved from beneath me. She's with both of them. Not just with him, Jenna said, her voice sharp with a new, urgent energy. She's not a mistress, Mrs. Vane. She's a weapon. Julian isn't the player. He's the pawn. Jenna's analysis came fast, a brutal reconstruction of my reality. We dug into her. Serafina isn't just a pretty face. She's got a predatory financial record from her time in Hong Kong. My guess she's playing a much, much bigger game. Marcus Thorne is using her. Using her for what? To clean house, Jenna said. Remember that internal audit I mentioned? It's real. Someone at Aurelian has been skimming. Big time. Committing major financial fraud. And Marcus Thorne is letting it happen, right up until the moment he needs a head on a platter to feed to the SEC. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture so ugly I could hardly look at it. Julian, I breathed. Julian, Jenna confirmed. Your husband. He's arrogant, he's greedy, and he's sloppy. Serafina comes back into his life, convinces him she's still in love with him. He wants to impress her. So he tells her things. He shows her the secret deals he's working on, the off-book accounts, the very ones he's using to steal from you. And she's feeding it all, I said, finishing the thought. Straight to Marcus Thorne. Exactly. Julian thinks he's using Serafina to climb the corporate ladder, to secure his position, but Serafina and Marcus are using him as a scapegoat. They're letting him dig his own grave, and Serafina is handing him the shovel, telling him he's digging for gold. The plan, the audio recording, the party will be the perfect debut. The party, I said, my blood running cold. His plan. He said he was going to make some final deal at the party. He's going to announce his promotion. Jenna shook her head, a grim, pitying look on her face. No, Mrs. Vane. That party isn't his celebration. It's his execution. That deal he's so excited about. That's the trap. Serafina and Marcus have set him up. They're going to let him present his fraudulent deal to all the partners, and Marcus will be there to catch him red-handed. They're going to expose him, ruin him, and pin the entire company's fraud on him, and his loving mistress will be the star witness who bravely brought it all to the CEO's attention. My husband wasn't just leaving me, he was about to be obliterated, and I was supposed to be the oblivious, heartbroken wife left standing in the rubble. I left the coffee shop and walked for an hour, the manila envelope heavy in my purse, the burner phone a cold weight in my pocket. My mind was racing, recalculating every angle. The plan to just expose Julian felt small now, almost petty. It was like planning to swat a fly when the whole house was infested with termites. Julian was a fool, a greedy, arrogant, and predictable fool. He was already a dead man walking, professionally. My exposing his infidelity and personal fraud would just be one more nail in a coffin he had built for himself. The real players, the sharks, were Serafina and Marcus Thorne. They were the ones pulling the strings, and they were about to walk away clean. Marcus would have his scapegoat. Serafina would have a promotion, a large payout from Marcus. She was sleeping with him, using Julian's stolen information to secure her own position. She was playing them both, and Marcus was letting her, right up until the moment he didn't need her anymore. I realized with a sickening lurch that my party, my trap, was flawed. I was planning to spring it on Julian, only to have Marcus Thorne step in, thank me for my service, and take control of the narrative. I would still be the poor, cheated-on wife, and he would be the decisive CEO cleaning house. No, that was not acceptable. If I was going to burn down Julian's life, I couldn't leave his master standing in the ashes. Julian's guest list was my new battlefield. He had, of course, invited Marcus Thorne, his boss, the guest of honor he was so desperate to impress. But Marcus wasn't the person I needed. I needed his wife. I went home and spent the next 12 hours not on my own audit, but on an audit of Isabella Thorne. She was the opposite of Serafina. She wasn't a footnote in Julian's college stories. She was a Denver institution, married to Marcus for 25 years, a formidable philanthropist, the quiet, dignified face of the Thorne family's massive charitable foundation. She was old money, and Marcus was new. And then I found the real weapon. In the SEC filings for Aurelian Capital, I found the shareholder reports. Marcus Thorne held a significant portion of the company, but the largest single block of shares, nearly 40%, was held in a family trust, a trust that, after 25 years of marriage, listed Isabella Thorne not just as a beneficiary, but as the sole trustee. Marcus was the king, but Isabella controlled the kingdom. I needed to see her, and I needed her to see me not as a victim, but as an equal. I found my opportunity that same night. The Denver Art Museum was hosting its annual Art and Augury fundraising gala. Isabella Thorne was the chairwoman. I went back to my secret investment account and made a 5-figure donation, securing a last-minute ticket. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, the one Julian had always called boring. I found her near the main exhibit, a sculpture of a bronze wolf. She was immaculate in a dark blue gown, radiating an aura of untouchable control. I waited until she was alone for a moment. Between conversations with senators and bankers, I didn't rush. I walked up to her calmly. Mrs. Thorne. Her smile was polite, practiced, and cold. Yes. Ilara Vane. My husband is Julian Vane, at Aurelian Capital. It's a pleasure to meet you. Of course, she said, her eyes already scanning the room for her next obligation. It's lovely to have you. Forgive me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. This isn't a social introduction. I'm a forensic accountant by training, and I have discovered a severe, time-sensitive compliance vulnerability at Aurelian Capital. It involves my husband. Her gaze snapped back to me. The polite mask vanished. She searched my face, not for emotion, but for credibility. She led me to a small, quiet alcove, away from the music. You have 2 minutes. My husband is guilty, I said, but he is a pawn. He is being framed by an employee named Serafina Brennan, who he has also been paying as a consultant from fraudulent accounts. I pulled a small, encrypted USB drive from my clutch. This contains my full audit of my husband's fraud, but he is not the only man she is involved with at Aurelian, and I believe she is targeting your husband as well. Isabella's face remained a mask of stone, but her stillness was more terrifying than any outburst. This drive, I continued, contains proof of their relationship, but more importantly, it contains evidence that Ms. Brennan has been actively attempting to gain access to several of Mr. Thorne's personal offshore accounts. The same accounts, I'm sure you know, that are commingled with the family trust. She is not just sleeping with your husband, Mrs. Thorne. She is trying to steal from you. The affair was an insult. The theft was a declaration of war. Isabella took the USB drive. Her manicured fingers closed around it. I delivered the final, baited line. My husband, in his infinite arrogance, is insisting that Serafina attend our 10th anniversary party tonight. He has, of course, also invited Marcus as the guest of honor. I fear she plans to use the party as a stage to publicly cement her new position with your husband. I thought, perhaps, you should be there, to accompany him, to ensure stability. Isabella Thorne looked at me, a long, cold, calculating gaze. This was a transaction. We were two queens discussing a border dispute. She understood exactly what I was offering her: the location, the weapon, and the perfect alibi of a concerned hostess. She didn't thank me. She didn't commiserate. She simply gave a single sharp nod. I will be there. The alliance was set. The day of the party, our penthouse was transformed. It was no longer a cold steel cage. It was a stage, set for a grand performance. The white orchids I had watched arrive were now everywhere. their scent heavy and sweet, masking the smell of steel. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music a polite, expensive veneer over the silence I had lived in for years. Servers in crisp black uniforms moved through the rooms with trays of vintage champagne. Every detail was perfect, opulent, and suffocating. Julian was in his element. He had been preening all afternoon, radiating an almost electric smugness. An hour before the guests were set to arrive, he came up behind me as I was adjusting a centerpiece. He held a long, velvet box. "For you," he said, his voice brimming with false generosity. "To a perfect decade, my love." I opened it. A diamond necklace. It was massive, a river of ice-cold, flawless stones. It was stunning, and it was vulgar. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin. I had to fight the urge to flinch. The diamonds settled against my collarbone, heavy and cold as a shackle. "It's beautiful, Julian," I said, my voice a perfect practiced whisper. I met his eyes in the reflection from the glass window. "You shouldn't have." "Nonsense," he said, admiring his own reflection over my shoulder. "Only the best for my wife. Tonight is important. I want you to look the part." "I always do," I said, my smile unwavering. He left to dress, and the moment I was alone, I made my final call. I stepped onto the terrace, the cold November air a welcome shock against my skin. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Chloe." "Ilara. My God, I haven't heard from you in—" "I know. I'm sorry. I don't have time to explain. I need a favor," I said, my voice low and urgent. Chloe had been my boss at the accounting firm, my mentor, the one who told me I was making a historic mistake by retiring at 24 to marry Julian. She had always hated him, had seen the controller in him when I had only seen the charm. "Chloe, I need you at my party tonight, at my home, in 1 hour." There was a silence. "Ilara, what's going on? Are you okay?" "No, but I will be," I said. "I don't need you here as a friend. I need you as a professional witness. I need the best forensic accountant I know. Bring your laptop, the one with the high-end encryption, and bring a data stick." The silence on the other end was profound, and then I heard a low, slow whistle. "Oh, my God," Chloe breathed. "You're doing it. You're finally auditing the bastard." "I've already done it," I said. "Tonight, I'm presenting my findings." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said, and hung up. The guests began to arrive at 7, the elite of Denver, a sea of silk, tuxedos, and surgically enhanced smiles. I was the perfect hostess. I glided through the room, my diamond collar glittering. I laughed in all the right places, accepted compliments on the orchids, on my dress, on my perfect marriage. I watched Julian. He was holding court by the fireplace, a glass of the Macallan 50 in his hand. I made a quiet signal to the server I had privately instructed. Julian's glass was to never be empty. I didn't want him drunk. I wanted him relaxed, overconfident, his inhibitions softened by expensive scotch and his own monumental ego. He was expansive. He was charming. He was introducing people, clapping men on the back, his laugh louder than anyone's. Chloe arrived, not through the main entrance, but through the service elevator, just as I had arranged. She was dressed in a sleek black pantsuit, her laptop in a discreet designer tote bag. She gave me one look, a mixture of "I told you so" and fierce, absolute loyalty. She went directly to the media room, which overlooked the main living area, and plugged her laptop into the central sound and video hub I had shown her earlier. She gave me a single nod. The auditor was in place. The party reached its peak. The string quartet played louder. The air was thick with champagne and success. Julian found me by the window, his eyes bright with triumph and scotch. He pulled me close, his arm possessive around my waist. "Look at them," he whispered in my ear, his breath hot. The entire city is here. Our city. I smiled and nodded, playing the part. See Marcus Thorne over there, he murmured, nodding toward the fireplace. Marcus had arrived, looking stern and powerful, but he was alone. Isabella had not come with him. He's watching. Tonight's my big night. Alara, my big night. He gave me a squeeze. After tonight, everything changes. I looked up at him, my practiced, perfect smile firmly in place. The diamonds felt like they were burning my skin. I let a touch of genuine emotion into my voice, a tremor of what he would mistake for wifely adoration. I know, darling, I whispered back. I know. The quartet was in the middle of a sharp, bright Vivaldi piece. The air, which had been thick with perfume, expensive scotch, and the low hum of 100 powerful conversations, suddenly felt thin. I was watching Julian. He was on his 4th glass of Macallan, his face flushed not with alcohol, but with pure, unadulterated arrogance. He was a man who believed he had already won. Then, precisely at 8:30, the main doorbell chimed. The sound cut through the music. Julian's head snapped toward the entrance, and a smile so wide and genuine that it was hideous split his face. It was a smile I had not seen in years, and it was not for me. She's here, he announced, his voice too loud, directed at no one and everyone. He didn't wait for the staff. He set his glass down, straightened his custom tuxedo jacket, and strode to the grand entryway himself. A king greeting a visiting monarch. He pulled the heavy double doors open, and there she was, Seraphina Brennan. The outline in my memory had described a red dress, but that was a pale description. This was not a dress. It was a statement of war. It was a column of arterial red silk, cut so low it was a marvel of engineering, so bright it seemed to suck the other colors from the room. She was designed, from her perfectly coiffed blonde hair to her impossibly high heels, to be the only thing anyone looked at. She glided into the room, bypassing Julian as if he were merely the doorman. Her perfume, a heavy, expensive musk, arrived before she did. She stopped directly in front of me, her eyes sweeping over my perfect hostess gown with amused pity. She held out a small, exquisitely wrapped box. "Ilara," she purred, her voice like velvet sliding over broken glass. "You've done so well with the house." The condescension was a physical thing, a thick, oily layer settling over the room. "You've been a good little housekeeper. You kept my boyfriend's home tidy for me." I took the gift, my own smile never wavering. "Seraphina, we're so glad you could make it." Julian was right behind her, beaming, positively glowing. "Everyone," he announced, clapping his hands together, "I'd like you all to meet Seraphina Brennan, an old, dear friend, and my new star consultant at Aurelian Capital." He put his hand on her, not on her shoulder, not on her arm. He placed his hand flat on the bare skin of her lower back, a gesture of such blatant possession that the room's ambient hum dropped by several decibels. He was parading her, he was marking his territory, and he was doing it in front of me, in front of his partners, in front of the entire city. Seraphina, for her part, simply basked in it. She turned her head, her gaze sweeping the room until it landed on one man, Marcus Thorne. He was standing alone by the fireplace, nursing a single glass of water, watching. Seraphina's lips curved into the smallest, most secret, and most triumphant smile I have ever seen. It was a look between co-conspirators, a look that said, "It's all going according to plan. Watch the fool perform." She thought he was there for her, to witness their shared victory, to watch Julian's self-immolation. Julian, oblivious to this silent exchange, retrieved his glass and held it high. The quartet, sensing a speech, quieted. "Friends," he began, his voice booming with confidence. "Partners, thank you for coming. Tonight marks a perfect decade, a decade of building." He was cut off. The doorbell chimed again, loud, sharp, and insistent. Julian's face, which had been so beatific, instantly darkened. The mask slipped. He scowled toward the door, his moment ruined. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "The party has started. Tell them to wait." I turned away from him. I felt the weight of the diamonds on my neck, cold and heavy. I set my own untouched champagne flute down on a passing server's tray. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden, expectant hush, it carried perfectly. "Ah," I said, a small, polite smile on my face. That must be her replacement. Julian stared at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What did you just say?" Serafina's smile wavered, a tiny crack in the perfect crimson facade. I didn't answer them. I walked past the servers. I walked past my fuming husband. I walked past his stunning mistress. I walked all the way to the grand entryway myself. I pulled open the heavy door. Standing on the threshold, framed by the cold night air, was Isabella Thorne. She was not in a dress designed to start a fire. She was in a gown of midnight blue so dark it was almost black, tailored with lethal precision. Around her neck was a river of sapphires that made my own diamond collar look like a cheap trinket. She was not a queen. She was an empress. Her eyes met mine. They were cold, clear, and in complete, silent understanding. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile, the smile of a hostess who is truly delighted. "Isabella," I said, my voice projecting clearly back into the silent, watching room. "Thank you so much for coming. I was so afraid you hadn't received my invitation." Isabella Thorne swept into the room, not just as a guest, but as an occupying force. The whisper-thin veneer of polite society fractured instantly. Julian, who had been mid-scowl, simply looked baffled. His brain couldn't process this new variable. His script for the night had been simple welcome mistress, impress boss, destroy wife. This was not in the script. Serafina's triumphant, predatory smile was gone, replaced by a mask of brittle confusion. She shot a quick, panicked glance at Marcus Thorne. And Marcus, the Titan. He was the most telling. He had been observing the scene with the cool detachment of a director watching his play, but at the sight of his wife whom he had not brought, his mask of control slipped, his face went rigid, his eyes darted to Serafina, then to Julian, and finally to me. And in that 1-second glance, I saw it. Not just annoyance, pure, cold dread. He was no longer a director. He was an actor who had just forgotten his lines. Isabella ignored them all. She glided past Serafina, past Julian, and walked directly to me. She took my hand. "Alara," she said, her voice a low, clear contralto that carried across the room. "Thank you for the invitation. It seems I've arrived just in time for the festivities." I smiled. "Perfect timing. Isabella?" I turned, leaving her at the entryway as a sentinel, and walked to the center of the room. A server was standing nearby, frozen, holding a tray of full champagne flutes. I plucked one from his tray, with the silver spoon I had taken from the hors d'oeuvres table. I tapped it. Ting, ting, ting. The sound was delicate, but it sliced through the stunned silence. The string quartet, confused, trailed off into a discordant stop. Every eye in the room, over 100 pairs of eyes, was on me. I had their full, undivided attention. My transformation from hostess to executioner was complete. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice calm, warm, and perfectly amplified by the room's acoustics. "Thank you all so much for coming, for celebrating 10 years with us." I smiled at Julian. He was still confused, but his arrogance was returning, assuming I was simply resuming my speech for him. He smiled back, a smug, patronizing look. "A decade is a long time," I continued, my gaze sweeping the room, landing on the faces of his partners, his friends. "It's a testament to loyalty, to partnership, to transparency. I turned my gaze back to my husband. My husband, Julian, has always taught me so much about business. He always said that a successful partnership, in marriage or in finance, is all about knowing the true value of your partner. I raised my glass slightly, and tonight, on our 10th anniversary, I want to honor that. I want to raise a glass not just to my partner, but to all the other partners who have helped make our lives so incredibly rich. A few people smiled, mistaking this for a generic thank you. Marcus Thorne did not. Serafina Brennan did not. I turned my body, slowly, deliberately, until I was facing Serafina. She was trapped in her red dress, her eyes wide, a beautiful animal caught in a snare. A special toast, I said, to Serafina, Julian's closest colleague. I raised my glass to her. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so total. I could hear the faint hum of the climate control, and then, from the speakers all around the room, the ones that had been playing Vivaldi, came a new sound. It wasn't music. It was a click, a faint, static hiss, and then a voice, Julian's voice. "Don't worry, she'll be ruined after the party." It was sharp, clear, and unmistakable. A collective gasp, a physical thing, moved through the room. Julian's face went from smug to white. He looked around, confused, for the source of the sound. Then, Serafina's voice, like honey and venom. "She's too simple to check the accounts. She's completely, utterly, financially illiterate." Julian's head snapped toward Serafina, his eyes wide with betrayal. Serafina herself looked like she had been struck. She looked at me, her face a mask of dawning, uncomprehending horror. "What is this?" Julian bellowed, but his voice was drowned out by his own words, recorded and amplified, echoing from every corner of his perfect glass and steel prison. The room was paralyzed, but Julian broke first. The audio snippet, his own voice, his own plot acted like a cattle prod. "Turn that off!" he roared. He wasn't lunging at me. He was lunging toward the media room, toward the source of the sound. He assumed it was a simple trick, a recording he could stop. He scrambled for the control panel, his facade of an urbane executive shattering to reveal the desperate, cornered man beneath. He was too late. From her position on the mezzanine, Chloe hit the next key. The 3 massive 80-inch television screens that Julian had installed for his football games, the ones currently displaying abstract art, flickered to black. And then they lit up. But it wasn't what the guests expected. It wasn't the lurid, tear-stained evidence of an affair. There were no hotel photos, no explicit messages. It was a spreadsheet, a cold, clean, perfectly organized Excel ledger, rows and columns in stark black and white. I picked up the wireless microphone from the quartet's stand. It hissed to life, amplifying my voice over the shocked murmurs. "I'm afraid he can't turn this off," I said, my voice as calm as if I were announcing dinner. "It's not a recording. It's a live feed." I looked out at the crowd, at the bankers, the lawyers, the city council members. "As many of you know, Julian convinced me to leave my career when we married. But some of you, and I see my old boss Chloe up there, will remember what I used to do. My name is Alara Vane, and I was a forensic accountant." A new kind of hush fell over the room. This was no longer a domestic drama. It was a hostile takeover. "For the past 6 months," I continued, "while Julian was busy with his legacy project, I have been conducting a private internal audit of my own." As I spoke, Chloe's cursor moved. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced by a split-screen document comparison. On the left, you will see my genuine signature, taken from our original marriage license. On the right, you will see the Alara Vane that my husband forged on a second mortgage application for this very penthouse. A loan, by the way, for $5 million. The crowd audibly gasped. This wasn't just cheating. This was a crime they all understood. The screen changed again. A flowchart. "And here," I said, "is where that money went. A series of illegal wire transfers, laundered through 3 shell corporations, before landing in a specific offshore account in the Cayman Islands." I turned to Julian. He was frozen, his face the color of ash. "Julian didn't just cheat on me," I announced, my voice ringing with cold authority. "He committed aggravated bank fraud. He embezzled our marital assets, leveraging our home to fund Ms. Brennan's consulting fees." I pointed the microphone toward Serafina. "The account in the Caymans is in your name, isn't it? Serafina." All eyes swiveled to the woman in red. Her face was a mask of panic. This was not the plan. "This is insane," she shrieked, her voice high and cracking. This is slander. I'm leaving." She grabbed her clutch and made a move for the door, trying to push through the stunned guests. "I wouldn't," I said, "because you'll miss the best part." Serafina froze. "You see," I said, walking slowly toward the center of the room, "the real twist tonight isn't that my husband is a cheat and a thief. The real twist is that Julian is just a fool." I looked at Julian's white face. "Serafina isn't just playing me. Julian, she's playing you." Chloe's screen changed again. The spreadsheet was gone. The bank records were gone. Now, it was emails. The guests craned their necks. The text was large, projected onto all 3 screens. From S. "Brennan Aurelian capital to M. Thorne Aurelian capital subject. J. Vane compliance issues." "What?" Julian whispered, staring at the screen. The room watched in horrified silence as Chloe scrolled. It was all there. Serafina's meticulous reports to Marcus Thorne. Every detail of Julian's fraud, every off-book account, every stolen piece of information he had fed her to impress her, all neatly packaged and delivered straight to the CEO. She was using Julian's own theft as her leverage, her evidence to help Marcus clean house. Julian looked from the screen to Serafina, then to his boss, Marcus Thorne. His face was a grotesque picture of comprehension and despair. You set me up," he choked, pointing a shaking finger at Serafina. "Both of you." And then, Marcus Thorne did what sharks do. He smelled blood, and he attacked. He stepped forward from the fireplace, buttoning his jacket. He looked not at Julian, but at me. His face was a mask of cold, corporate gravity. "She's right," he announced, his voice silencing the room. Serafina, who had been trying to escape, stopped. Her face, which had been panicked, suddenly lit up with relief. She thought he was stepping in to save her, their shared plan. "Ms. Brennan," Marcus continued, "brought this troubling compliance issue to my attention several months ago. We appreciate her diligence. We have been monitoring Mr. Vane ever since." He turned, his gaze falling on Julian with the force of a guillotine. "Julian Vane, you are fired from Aurelian Capital, effective immediately. Security will meet you in the lobby. You are to have no further contact with any of our clients." Julian was annihilated. He stood in the wreckage of his own life, his face a mask of pasty, slack-jawed disbelief. He looked from Marcus, his idol, to Serafina, his conspirator. His voice was a hoarse whisper. You both. You set me up. This was a trap." Serafina, seeing her own future evaporating, made one last, desperate lunge. She turned to Marcus, her red dress now looking like a garish costume. Her voice was no longer a purr. It was a desperate, cracking plea. "Marcus, tell them," she shrieked, appealing to the man she thought was her partner. "Tell them this is insane. We did this together. We planned this. You and I. Tell them." Marcus Thorne looked at her. He didn't look angry. He didn't look betrayed. He looked bored. A small, cold, humorless laugh escaped his lips. He he repeated, the word dripping with disdain. There was no we, Ms. Brennan. You were a tool, a useful one, for a time. He calmly adjusted his jacket cuff. But tools get dull, and eventually, they are replaced. He looked past her, his gaze sweeping over the silent, horrified audience. You are also fired, Ms. Brennan, effective immediately. For gross violations of the company's ethics and morals clause, security will see you out, both of you. Serafina stopped. The color drained from her face, leaving her bright red lipstick looking like a bloody slash. She had played everyone, and in the final move, she was the one who had been played the hardest. She had lost her lover, her scapegoat, and her career, all in the span of 30 seconds. She had lost everything, but the night wasn't over. And you, Marcus. The voice came from the entryway. Isabella Thorne had been a silent, sapphire-clad shadow. Now, she advanced. She didn't rush. She moved with the slow, deliberate, unstoppable force of a glacier. She stopped just a few feet from her husband. The room was so quiet. The only sound was the faint chime of the ice settling in 100 abandoned glasses. You really thought, she said, her voice a low, clear contralto, that you would walk away from this clean. You thought you could pin the corporate fraud on Julian, fire the mistress, and return to your desk on Monday as the hero. Marcus's composure finally, visibly, cracked. A single bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Isabella, this is not the time, or the place. This is a private business matter. It stopped being a business matter. Marcus, she replied, the moment you started sleeping with the compliance issue. She turned, just slightly, her gaze meeting mine across the room. She gave me a single, appreciative nod. Thank you for the USB, Mrs. Vane, Isabella announced to the room. The evidence of my husband's relationship with Ms. Brennan. It was extremely thorough. The hotel receipts, the wire transfers to her personal accounts, all very, very well documented. This was the final killing blow. Marcus's face, which had been rigid, turned the color of chalk. His eyes locked on me. He finally understood. Julian was the first replacement, the man Serafina was meant to have. But Marcus Thorne, he was her replacement. The man I had brought for Serafina. The powerful CEO who would take her down with him. Isabella Thorne did not need to raise her voice. She spoke, and the world realigned to her words. As the sole trustee of the Thorne Family Trust, which, as many of you partners know, holds 40% of Aurelian capital, I am convening an emergency morals clause vote. Her eyes swept the other partners in the room, pinning them in place. My husband, Marcus Thorne, will be tendering his resignation, effective immediately. Our personal lawyers and the lawyers for the SEC will be in contact in the morning. I'm sure they'll have many, many questions about this internal fraud that he apparently knew about for months and failed to report. It was a public execution. As if on cue, the main elevator door chimed. But it wasn't a guest. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out, followed by my PI, Jenna Riley, who flashed them a discreet nod. Jenna, I called. Chloe, Jenna and Chloe, who had been watching from the mezzanine, moved to stand on either side of the entryway. The trap was now fully closed. No one was leaving. Police! Julian choked out, true, animal panic in his voice for the first time. Of course, I said, finally walking toward him. I couldn't let my official complaint of bank fraud go unreported. That would be irresponsible. I stopped directly in front of him, my husband, the man who had called me simple, docile, and financially illiterate. He was shaking, a trapped, pathetic thing. I reached up, not to strike him. I unclasped the heavy diamond necklace he had given me, the perfect decade, the shackle. It was heavy in my hand. He was still holding his champagne glass, the one he had been about to toast with. His hand was trembling so hard the champagne was sloshing over the rim. I looked him dead in the eyes, and I dropped the necklace. Plink. It landed in his glass of champagne with a small, pathetic splash, the diamonds instantly dulled by the expensive liquid. "Julian," I said, my voice quiet, but it was the only sound in the room. "You invited your ex, so I invited her replacement." I glanced at Marcus, who was now being addressed in low, serious tones by the police. "And his replacement." I turned back to Julian, "My husband of 10 years. The party is over. Get out of my house." Thank you so much for listening. I'm so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.